There are 607 unidentified persons in the state of Georgia right now. Not cold cases. Not missing persons. Unidentified meaning someone is alive, or was, and the system does not know who they are. They exist in hospitals and shelters and correctional facilities and morgues under names that are not their names. Jane Doe. John Doe. Patient 4471. Bed 12. They are people whose identities were severed from their names at some specific moment, an accident, a breakdown, a trauma too complete for the systems designed to catch them. The system that should have caught them failed somewhere in a moment of confusion. A bureaucratic gap, an emergency too chaotic for paperwork. 607 people. In Georgia alone. Right now. Maya Chen had identified 400 of them. Not in Georgia specifically. Across 11 states, across 10 years of forensic DNA work at the Southeast Regional Missing Persons Consortium in Atlanta. 400 files, 400 sets of DNA results, 400 moments where a number in a database became a name, where a photograph became a person, where a family on the other end of a phone call stopped waiting for something they had been waiting for, sometimes decades. 400 times, Maya Chen had been the person who knew. On a Tuesday morning in March 2023, she opened file 401 by 11:47 that same morning. She understood that she had spent a decade looking for other people's answers, while her own had been sitting in the database the entire time. The photograph in file 401 showed a woman in her mid-50s. Dark hair, streaked with gray. High cheekbones. A slight asymmetry to the left side of her face that came, according to the medical notation on the file, from a fracture that had healed incorrectly sometime before her admission. Maya looked at the photograph for 17 seconds before she understood what she was looking at. She knew because of the cheekbones. She knew because of the asymmetry. She knew because she had spent her entire adult life carrying a photograph in her wallet, a small, damaged photograph salvaged from the wreckage of a car, of a woman whose face she had been looking at for 22 years, without knowing the name that went with it. She put the photograph down. She breathed. She picked it up again. And then Maya Chen, who had closed 400 other people's gaps in 10 years, understood that gap number 401 had been hers all along. To understand how this happened, how a 6-year-old girl and her mother could be separated by a car accident and remain separated for 18 years, while one of them spent a decade doing the exact work that would eventually find the other. You need to understand the accident. You need to understand the specific failure of the systems that were supposed to connect them. And you need to understand that the failure was not dramatic. It was bureaucratic, which is in some ways the harder kind to forgive. June 14th, 2005 was a Wednesday. In Whitfield County, Georgia, 90 miles north of Atlanta, a 34-year-old woman named Lily Chen was driving south on US 4111 with her 6-year-old daughter in the back seat. It was late afternoon. The light was coming through the windshield at the angle it comes through in Georgia in June, flat and golden, and just bright enough to require squinting. They had been at Lily's sister's house in Dalton for the weekend. Maya had a stuffed rabbit she called Bun on the seat beside her. She was asleep when the pickup truck ran the red light. The impact was on the driver's side. It was significant. Lily Chen absorbed most of it. Maya, in the rear passenger seat in the correct car seat, survived with a concussion, a broken collarbone, and a gash above her right eye that left a pale scar she still carries. She was found by a passerby 15 minutes after the crash, still buckled in the rear of a car that had come to rest in a drainage ditch 40 feet from the intersection. She did not know her last name. The concussion had done something to the connective tissue of her short-term memory, the specific memory that holds recent context, recent names, recent addresses. She knew her first name. She knew the rabbit's name. She knew she had a mother, and she knew something had happened, but she did not know what it was called or what would happen next. She was 6 years old, and she was in a ditch, and the world had just changed, and she did not have the language for any of it. Lily Chen was taken by ambulance to a hospital in Dalton, 12 miles north. Maya was taken by a different ambulance to a hospital in Chatsworth, 9 miles south. The first ambulance arrived at the crash scene first, picked up the more critically injured adult, and drove north. The second arrived minutes later, found the child, and drove south. Neither crew knew about the other patient. Neither hospital knew about the other hospital. This was the beginning of the failure, what the consortium would identify 18 years later as the single most consequential factor in the two patients not being connected was this: the car had been towed by the time either investigation became active. The car contained Lily's wallet with her state ID, her cell phone with Maya's photograph as the lock screen wallpaper, and the vehicle registration with their Atlanta address. If any investigator had accessed the car's contents within the first 48 hours, the connection would have been immediate. A woman with a child's photograph on her phone. A child who couldn't remember her last name. The connection was there. It was sitting in an impound lot. Nobody went to look at it. By the time the Children's Services investigator in Murray County thought to request the vehicle contents, the car had been impounded for 5 days. The wallet and phone had been cataloged as personal property. Personal property of an adult was accessible only to the adult or their next of kin. Lily was a Jane Doe. She had no next of kin on record in Whitfield County. The window closed. Two people who had been in the same car on US 411 on a Wednesday afternoon became two separate cases in two separate counties in two separate systems that were not designed to cross-reference each other. That was the failure. It was not dramatic. It was a series of ordinary decisions made by ordinary people operating within ordinary constraints. Each decision individually defensible and collectively catastrophic. The investigations produced what they produced. The Jane Doe in Dalton was stabilized, transferred to rehabilitation, eventually transferred to long-term memory care. The unidentified child in Chatsworth was assessed, determined to be without family in the immediate area, placed in emergency foster care, and assigned a case number. The two case numbers existed in two different systems. Neither system had a mechanism to compare them. Maya Voss, she used that name, the foster family's name, for 2 years before she transitioned again, became Maya Huang. Then, at 21, Maya Chen. The name on her original 2005 file in the Georgia D system was still Jane Doe Child, Murray County. Her mother's file in the Whitfield County system was Jane Doe Adult. They were two of Georgia's unidentified people. They had been two of Georgia's unidentified people for 18 years until they weren't. Maya, in the children's ward in Chatsworth, was discharged after 4 days. She told the doctors her name was Maya. She told them she had a mama. She could not tell them anything else. She was 6 years old, and she had a concussion, and she had been removed from the most destabilizing experience of her short life and placed in a room that smelled like antiseptic and where strangers in scrubs kept asking her questions she did not have the answers to. The investigation to connect the two patients was, by every account, inadequate. The county sheriff's office opened a case on the unidentified woman in Dalton. The Children's Services office in Murray County opened a case on the unidentified child in Chatsworth. Both cases were filed. Neither investigator, at any point in the 4-day window when connection was most possible, made the call that would have connected them. The consortium, reviewing the 2005 records in 2023 as part of the identification documentation, found that there had been no protocol requiring cross-county notification in cases involving suspected family groups separated at accident scenes. There is one now. It was implemented in 2019, following a similar case in Florida that received national attention. It would have changed everything in 2005. It was not available in 2005. Maya has been asked whether she is angry about this, about the failure, about the 18 years, about the specific, bureaucratic, non-dramatic sequence of ordinary decisions that separated her from her mother for the length of her childhood. She has said, "I was angry for a while. Not at specific people, there are no specific people to be angry at. At the gaps, at the way the gaps work, at the fact that the gaps exist and that people fall through them, and that the falling is not dramatic, it is just the absence of a protocol, the absence of a cross-reference, the absence of someone who knew to ask a question that the system didn't prompt them to ask." I was angry at that. I think that anger is legitimate. And I also do the work that fills the gaps. That is the relationship I have to it. She said this in the same interview, toward the end of it, in the specific, careful way of someone who has thought about something for a long time and arrived at a position that is honest without being simple. It was the specific failure that bureaucratic systems produce when two separate jurisdictions are each handling one half of the same event and neither has the mandate or the mechanism to look laterally. The sheriff's office in Whitfield County, which covered the accident location, opened a case and transferred the Jane Doe to Dalton. Murray County Children's Services opened a case on the child recovered at the scene. These were two different offices in two different counties with two different databases. There was no cross-reference protocol. There was no flag on the accident file that read, "There was a child in this vehicle." There was no note in the Children's Services file that read, "This child was in an accident that may have also involved an adult." The car, which contained Lily's wallet, her phone with Maya's photograph as the home screen wallpaper, and the registration with their Atlanta address remained in impound. Nobody from either investigation requested the contents in the first 4-day window when it would have mattered most. By the time someone did, the phone battery was dead, and the contents had been cataloged as personal property inaccessible without next of kin. Lily was a Jane Doe. She had no next of kin on record in Whitfield County. Maya was placed in emergency foster care in Murray County on June 18, 2005. She was 6 years old. She had a stuffed rabbit and a scar above her right eye and a first name and nothing else. She did not see her mother again for 18 years. The years of not knowing were not a single sustained loss. They were a series of small losses, each one arriving fresh the first birthday without context. The first Mother's Day. The first time a school form asked for parents' names and she had nothing to put. She adapted the way children in her situation adapted, by building the structures of a life around what was available and learning not to depend on what wasn't. She was good at this. She developed the skill of being present in each new placement without requiring the permanence that wasn't on offer. She was adopted at 13. This was later than most, which meant the Huangs, David and Patricia, both teachers, both patient in the specific way of people who have been waiting for the right match, were unusually committed to a child who had learned to hold people at the precise distance that made departure manageable. She tested that distance. They did not leave. She tested it again. They did not leave. By 15, she had begun, cautiously, to let it close. She did not tell them about the photograph until she was 18. She carried it privately, ran searches from the family computer in the evenings, typed descriptions of the woman into every platform she could find. Nobody returned a result. The woman in the photograph did not appear in any missing persons database. Because no one had reported Lily Chen missing, her sister Sandra had been told a Jane Doe from the accident had survived and been transferred to rehabilitation. And she had waited for contact that never came. And by the time she understood the contact was not coming, she had no legal mechanism to force information from a healthcare provider about an adult patient. At 16, Maya found her original surname in a digitized school record from the Chatsworth Hospital, a partial transcription Chen, marked as unconfirmed. But there. She held it for 5 years before she changed her name legally. At 21, in a courthouse in Athens between classes, she became Maya Chen again. Nobody came with her. She had not told anyone she was doing it. The name had been hers before anything else, and she wanted it back. She completed the forensic biology program at UGA and joined the consortium in 2020. The work was identification. It had always been going to be identification. She just hadn't known until she arrived at it that it was what she'd been moving toward. What happened to Lily across those 18 years was the specific interior experience of a person who has been separated from her own history. She recovered, slowly and partially, from the physical trauma of the accident. By 2007, she could walk unassisted. By 2008, she could hold a conversation. Her speech had returned. Her ability to track sequences and make basic decisions had returned. What had not returned was the connective tissue of her past, the names, the relationships, the knowledge of who she was before June 14, 2005. Doctors described it as a profound disruption to autobiographical memory, which is the specific kind of memory that holds the self. She knew how to do things. She knew that she was a person. She did not know who that person had been. She was transferred to the Coastal Gardens Memory Care Facility in Savannah in 2009 when the rehabilitation facility in Dalton determined that her condition had stabilized, but that she required ongoing care that they were not equipped to provide. She was 38 years old. She would spend the next 14 years in Savannah being called Ruth. The staff at Coastal Gardens described her in their notes and in conversations with Maya after the identification as one of their most consistent residents present, cooperative, curious about the garden, fond of a particular kind of puzzle magazine. She helped where she could. She remembered the staff. She was not without a self. She simply did not have the history that connected herself to a name. She had a fragment, she described, in conversations with her therapist over the years, as a feeling she could not locate. A warmth. A weight. Something small that she had held. She did not know what it was or where it came from. She had carried this fragment for 18 years alongside everything else she could not name. She had carried it the way you carry something you understand is important and cannot identify carefully, without resolution, because it was the only piece of the thing it belonged to that she had. Maya Chen did not know any of this when she opened file 401. She knew what the file said: an unidentified female, admitted 2009, accident June 2005. She knew the photograph. She knew the cheekbones. She knew, before the DINA confirmed it, before the verification was complete, before her supervisor had signed the paperwork, that the woman in the file and the woman in her wallet were the same person. She knew it the way she had always known things that came from below the level of analysis, not as a conclusion, but as a fact, arriving complete, requiring confirmation but not construction. What happened to Maya across those 18 years was not a single narrative so much as the accumulation of what childhood in the foster system accumulates: a series of placements, some better than others, none permanent enough to become home in the way that the word home usually means. She moved between families 5 times before she was 12. She was adopted at 13 by a couple in Marietta named David and Patricia Huang, who gave her their last name, which she would legally change to Chen, her original name, recovered from a school record that surfaced in 2016 when she was 21. The years in the system had not been easy and had not been uniformly hard. They had been what they were: a series of rooms and schools and family configurations that she moved through with the specific adaptive competence of a child who has learned that nothing is permanent and has made a private peace with this. She was a good student everywhere she went. She was good at problems that had definite answers: math, science, puzzles with solutions. She was less good at the open-ended ones, the ones where the answer depended on interpretation or context or felt sense. She could close the solvable things. She preferred them. She had 2 memories of her mother. Not clear memories, fragments, impressions the specific quality of a recollection that has been accessed so many times it has begun to lose the precision of its original form. The first was a smell, something citrus and warm, not identifiable as a specific product, but as a quality of presence, the smell of a person who had always been there. The second was a sound, a voice saying her name in a specific way, with a specific emphasis on the second syllable, Maya, the way only one person had ever said it. She had these two things. She held them the way you hold things you understand could slip. She also had the photograph. She kept it in her wallet throughout all of this. She had recovered it from the stuffed rabbit in 2010 when she was 11 years old, on a day when she was going through the box of items that had been in her possession at the time of the accident and that had been stored by the state in a sealed bag since 2005. The bag contained the rabbit, a pair of small sneakers, and a hair tie. She opened the zippered pocket on the rabbit's back and found the photograph and the quarter and another hair tie that had been red. The photograph was folded in half and slightly damaged at the fold, but the face was intact and clear. She recognized it immediately. She did not know why she recognized it. She would not understand until much later that she was recognizing it because she had been looking at it in fragments and impressions for 5 years. She kept the photograph in her wallet from that day forward. She looked at it regularly. She typed descriptions of the woman into missing persons databases from the time she was 14 years old. She submitted the photograph to genealogical websites and facial recognition services in every platform that offered the possibility of identification. Nothing returned a result. The woman in the photograph did not match any missing persons record. The reason she did not match any missing persons record was that no one had filed a missing persons report for Lily Chen, because the people who would have filed it, Lily's sister in Dalton, her colleagues at the advertising agency in Atlanta where she worked, had been told by the hospital in Dalton that the Jane Doe from the accident had survived and been transferred to a rehabilitation facility. They had assumed this meant she would eventually recover and contact them. They had waited. She had not contacted them. By the time they understood that the waiting was not going to end the way they expected, the trail had gone too cold and too complicated for the systems available to a family without legal standing to compel information from a healthcare provider about an adult patient. Lily's sister, a woman named Sandra Reeves, had tried for years. She had not had Maya's tools. She had not known about the consortium. She would call Maya weeks after the identification, with a specific quality of exhausted relief that Maya recognized from the families on the other end of her own confirmation, calls the sound of someone who has been holding something heavy for a very long time and has finally been permitted to put it down. Maya studied forensic biology at the University of Georgia, graduated in 2019, and was hired at the Southeast Regional Missing Persons Consortium in 2020. The choice of field was not accidental and was also not as deliberate as it might appear from the outside. She had not chosen forensic NA work specifically to find her mother. She had chosen it because it was the most direct available path from a question with no answer to the tools required to find one, and she had spent her entire life in the proximity of a question with no answer. The work felt native to her in a way she could not entirely articulate. She was good at it in the specific way that people are good at work that uses both the technical precision they have been trained in and the emotional endurance they have been building since before they knew they were building it. She had opened 400 files before she opened file 401. She knew, with the specific knowledge that 400 identifications give you, what she was doing each time she opened one. She knew what the work meant to the person at the other end of it. She knew what 18 years of waiting sounded like when it ended. She had heard it 400 times. Got on a Tuesday morning in March 2023, she opened file 401, and she heard it again. Differently, from the inside, The Southeast Regional Missing Persons Consortium handled DNA identification work for 11 southeastern states. The work was methodical and technical, and, in the view of people who did not understand its scale, invisible, the kind of work that happened in databases and laboratories and did not announce itself when it succeeded, because the successes belonged to the families, not to the analysts. Maya was good at the work in the specific way that people are good at work that uses both the technical precision they have been trained in and the emotional endurance they have been building since, before they knew they were building it. She understood, in a way that some of her colleagues did not, what the numbers in the database represented. Not cases. People. She had learned this formally in training. She had known it informally since she was 6 years old and had been a number in a database. A case number in Murray County Children's Services. An unidentified child. The case number had a story behind it. All of them did. She had identified 400 of those stories in 10 years. Some quickly. Some across months of careful comparison. Some had produced conclusions that families had been dreading remains, not survivors, gaps closed in the hardest possible direction. She had made those calls too. She had made 400 calls of every kind, and she had stayed steady on each of them, because steadiness was what the moment required. And she had been building steadiness since before she had the word for it. What she had not known on any of those 400 calls was that she was also building something else. Not deliberately, not consciously. The way you build things when you are doing the work in front of you so completely that you don't notice what the work is building in you. On a Tuesday morning in March 2023, she opened file 401. She had opened it the same way she opened every file, starting with intake, working through medical history, arriving at the photograph. 40 minutes of methodical progress before she reached the date. June 14th, 2005, before she opened the photograph. Before she understood. And then she did. The file for what would become case 401 had arrived at the consortium via a referral from Coastal Gardens Memory Care in Savannah. The facility had 3 long-term unidentified residents and had enrolled in a voluntary identification program the consortium operated for care facilities. The referral included biological profiles, medical histories, and photographs for all 3 residents. 2 of the 3 had been matched within 6 months. The third, the woman the staff called Ruth, had remained unmatched because her medical history had been incomplete. Her original admission records from 2005 were partial, and the reference sample from her most likely biological family had only been entered into the system recently. Following Sandra Reeves' discovery of the consortium's existence through an online support community for families of the missing, Sandra had submitted her reference sample in January 2023. The system had flagged a potential comparison based on partial data in February. The file had been assigned to Maya's queue in March as a full comparison priority case. It was routine intake work. A rotation system, a caseload, a Tuesday morning. Maya opened it at 11:30 a.m. She spent 40 minutes with the medical history. She reached the date. She noted it. She opened the photograph. 17 seconds. Then she put the photograph down and breathed and went to the window and looked at Atlanta and came back to her desk and opened her wallet and took out the photograph she had carried for 17 years and set the 2 photographs side by side. In one photograph, the woman was 32 years old and smiling. In the other, she was in her mid-50s and not smiling. In 18 years of living as someone who could not remember who she was, had changed the face in ways that were visible and had not changed it in the ways that were fundamental, the structure of the cheekbones, the asymmetry, the wave in the hair, the specific quality of presence that the camera caught and that Maya recognized not as a trained analyst recognizes evidence, but as a daughter recognizes. Her mother. She called her supervisor. The verification process took 72 hours. It confirmed what Maya already knew. File 401 was Lily Chen. Her mother. What happened in the 14 months after March 2023 is the story of two people building something together that had no template. Maya had not grown up with her mother. Lily did not have continuous access to who she had been before 2005. What they were building was not a restoration, not the recovery of what had existed before June 14, 2005, in any form that resembled that original. It was something else. Something new. Built from what Lily could access and what Maya had. And what happened when you put those two things in the same room together on Saturday mornings and let them see what they could make. The fragment Lily had carried for 18 years, the warmth, the weight, the small thing held, had a name now. It was Bun. He was on the windowsill. He had been on the windowsill since Maya's second visit. Lily touched him sometimes when she passed. She did not always know why. But she always touched him. Maya has said she thinks about the 400 people she identified before her mother more than she thinks about anything else connected to this story. Not because they were preparation for it, exactly. Because they were the same work, the same gap, the same family on the other end. She had been doing for 400 families what she ultimately did for herself. And she had not known it, not once, not on any of those calls, until the morning she was the family on the other end. She had learned, across 10 years and 400 files, the exact shape of what she was doing. She had thought she was learning it for everyone else. It turned out she was learning it for herself too. Both of those things were true simultaneously, and neither canceled the other. File 401 is closed. The gap is closed. Lily Chen's name is in the consortium's database where Jane Doe used to be. Maya Chen opened 87 more files after that. She will open more. She opens everyone the same way: intake, history, photograph. She does not know which one will matter personally. She does not know which one is someone else's gap that she will close for them. She does not know which one might be hers in a way she doesn't yet understand. She opens them anyway. That is the work. That is what 10 years of building a skill that you don't know yet you will need looks like, from the inside, before you understand what you were building toward. She spent a decade finding 400 other people's answers. File 401 was always hers. She just had to find 400 other people first. File 401 had come to the consortium through a referral from a memory care facility in Savannah that had been conducting a routine effort to identify long-term unidentified residents. The facility, Coastal Gardens Memory Care, had 3 residents who had been admitted without confirmed identification and who had remained unidentified for extended periods. The file for one of them, a woman known to staff as Ruth, included a medical history going back to 2009 when she had been transferred from a rehabilitation facility in Dalton, Georgia. Following a years-long period of post-traumatic recovery from a severe brain injury. The original admission to the Dalton Rehabilitation Facility had been in 2005. The cause of admission had been listed as motor vehicle accident. The date of the accident was June 14, 2005. Maya had been processing the file for 40 minutes before she reached that date. She had noted it with the part of her brain that stored dates, the part that had stored June 14, 2005, since she was 6 years old, and had woken up in a hospital in Chatsworth and been told that there had been an accident and that they were looking for her family. She had stored that date the way you store the date of the thing that divides your life into before and after. She had been processing the file methodically when she reached it. She stopped. She looked at the date again. She went back to the photograph at the front of the file. The cheekbones. The asymmetry on the left side of the face. The dark hair, gray now, but the same texture, the same slight wave. The quality in the photograph of someone who was present and absent simultaneously. Who was in the frame, but not fully there, the quality that memory care photographs often had. That the person behind the face was somewhere the camera could not follow. Maya opened her wallet. She took out the photograph. The woman in the photograph in her wallet was 32 years old and smiling. The woman in file 401 was in her mid-50s and not smiling. But the cheekbones were the same cheekbones. The asymmetry was the same asymmetry. The slight wave of the hair was the same wave. She set both photographs side by side on her desk. She was aware that she was a forensic professional. She was aware that visual identification was not confirmation. She was aware that what she was experiencing in this moment, the specific physical sensation of understanding, arriving faster than processing, was not evidence. It was a hypothesis. And hypotheses required testing. She picked up her phone. She called her supervisor. She said, "I need to run a DINA comparison on file 401. I think I may have a conflict of interest." Her supervisor said, "What kind of conflict?" Maya said, "I think the unidentified person in the file might be my mother." The verification process took 3 days. This was not because the evidence was ambiguous. The DINA comparison was conclusive within 18 hours of the sample being submitted. It took 3 days because the protocol for a consortium employee being personally connected to an identification case required multiple layers of independent verification, supervisor sign-off, legal review, and notification through the Georgia Department of Human Services, which still had Maya's original 2005 file in its system, under the name Jane Doe Child, Murray County. Maya spent those 3 days doing 2 things simultaneously. She completed the other files on her desk, because the work continued regardless of what was happening in her personal life. And this was something she understood and accepted, and even found stabilizing the continuation of the ordinary work as a kind of anchor while something extraordinary was resolving itself in the background. And she looked up Coastal Gardens Memory Care in Savannah, which she had not heard of before file 401, and read everything publicly available about it, which was the ordinary information available about any care facility of its kind: staff roster, inspection history, patient capacity, visiting hours. She did not call ahead. She drove down on day 2, before the verification was complete, because she could not continue to sit in Atlanta waiting for confirmation of something she already knew. The drive from Atlanta to Savannah was 4 hours on I-16. Maya had made it several times before, for different reasons: a conference, a visit to a colleague, a drive she had taken once simply because she had needed to be moving. She made it differently this time. She was aware of every mile in a way she was not usually aware of miles. She was aware of Georgia in a way she was not usually aware of, states: the pine forests along the highway, the specific flat quality of the land east of Macon, the way the air changed as you moved toward the coast. She had grown up in this state. Her mother had been in this state, in a building 4 hours from Atlanta, for 14 years. She arrived at Coastal Gardens Memory Care at 2:30 in the afternoon. She parked in the visitor lot. She turned the engine off. She looked at the building through the windshield. It was a beige building with a green sign in a reassuring font and a parking lot with neatly trimmed hedges along the perimeter. It was ordinary. It was the kind of building she had driven past thousands of times in 28 years without looking at it, because there was no reason to look at it, because it was just a building in the landscape of the world. It was the building where her mother had been living for 14 years. She sat in the parking lot for 45 minutes. She did not go inside. She was aware that the verification was not complete. She was aware that entering the facility and making contact before the official identification was confirmed would complicate the protocol and potentially delay the process for everyone. She understood all of this clearly. She sat in the parking lot for 45 minutes anyway, because sometimes what is needed is not action, but proximity. The specific comfort of being close to the thing, even if you cannot yet reach it. Then she drove back to Atlanta. The official confirmation came on the morning of March 17th. Maya's supervisor called her into his office. The DINA comparison was conclusive. The woman known as Ruth at Coastal Gardens Memory Care was Lily Chen, born October 3, 1970, in Atlanta, Georgia. Last known address, Midtown Atlanta. Last confirmed location, US 4111 at Chatsworth Highway, Whitfield County, Georgia, June 14, 2005. Maya heard the words. She had known the words were coming. She had been carrying the knowledge of the words for 72 hours. Hearing them officially from her supervisor's mouth in the conference room with the fluorescent lighting and the dry erase board was different anyway. Words made official are different from words that are known. The official version existed in the world in a way the private knowledge had not. Her mother now had a name in the consortium's database. The file was closed. The identification was complete. Maya Chen drove to Savannah on the morning of March 18th. She arrived at Coastal Gardens Memory Care at 10:15 a.m. She had called ahead. The facility director met her in the lobby. He was careful and kind in the way of someone who has managed complex emotional situations in institutional settings for many years, not performing care, actually having it. He walked her through the intake paperwork which was required. He walked her down a carpeted hallway past closed doors. He stopped at a door at the end of the hallway. He said, "She has good days and less good days. Today is a good day." He said, "She knows you're coming. We told her she has a visitor." She asked if it was her daughter. Maya stood at the door. She had identified 400 people. She had made 400 calls. She had been the one who knew every time while the family waited. She had been the person with the information. She had always been on one side of the door, the side that knows. This was the first time she was going to be on the other side. This was the first time she was going to be the one waiting. She opened the door. The room was warm. A window faced a small enclosed garden. The woman sitting in the chair by the window, who had been Ruth for 14 years, who had been Lily Chen for 34 years before that, who had been someone's mother on a Georgia highway in June 2005, looked up when the door opened. She looked at Maya. The expression on her face was not immediate recognition in the way that recognition usually presents itself. It was something slower, a quality of attention that focused and narrowed and arrived at something it was not fully able to name. Like watching someone reach for a word in a language they almost remember. She said nothing for a long moment. Then she said, in a voice that was quiet and uncertain and careful in the way of someone reaching for something they are not sure will hold, "I know your face." Maya sat down on the edge of the bed across from her. She said, "I know yours too. I've been carrying it for a long time." The room was quiet. The garden outside was ordinary. Somewhere in the building, someone was watching television. The world was doing everything it always did. Maya Chen was 28 years old, and she was also 6 years old, and she was sitting across from her mother in Savannah, Georgia, on a Tuesday in March, and her mother knew her face. That was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything. What has been shared in careful and partial accounts across the 14 months since March 2023 is this. Lily Chen had no continuous memory of her life before the accident, but she had fragments, not names, not places, not connected sequences that could be assembled into a narrative. Fragments of smell, a color, a quality of light, the specific weight of something small and warm that she had held and that she had never been able to attach to anything in her recoverable world. She had described this fragment to her therapist at Coastal Gardens across 14 years as a feeling she could not locate. She did not know what she had been holding. She had not known that what she was carrying, without the ability to name it, was the memory of her daughter, the stuffed rabbit bun, as he had always been and continued to be, was brought to Savannah on Maya's second visit, 2 weeks after the first. She set him on the windowsill of the room. He is still there. Maya has said that she did not tell her mother on that first visit who she was. Not because she was hiding it, because Lily already knew. Not in the continuous biographical sense, not the way you know someone you have been related to for 28 years, but in the specific fragment sense that was the only knowing available to her. She knew the face. She had always known the face. She had just not known what to call it. Lily's sister Sandra flew from Dalton to Savannah 2 weeks after the identification. She had not seen Lily since 2005. The reunion between the two of them was, by Sandra's account, a different kind of reunion than the one between Lily and Maya, longer separated. Less equipped with the tools of recognition that Maya and Lily had in their shared faces, harder in some ways and easier in others. Sandra had a whole Lily in her memory. She was meeting a partial one. She has said, in conversations with Maya since, that she is still learning what it means to love a person who is all the person you remember and also not. Maya had never had a whole Lily. She had had a photograph and a smell and a voice saying Maya with a specific emphasis. She had come to the reunion with fewer things to lose and perhaps more to gain. She has not tried to quantify this. She has said, simply, that she is glad she came, and that she comes back every other Saturday, and that on most of those Saturdays her mother recognizes her immediately, and on some Saturdays it takes a moment, and on a few Saturdays it has taken longer than a moment, and that all of these Saturdays are the same Saturday in the way that matters. What happens on those Saturdays is ordinary. Coffee in the common room or the garden, depending on the weather. A puzzle magazine. Conversation about the garden and the staff, and what Maya has been working on at the consortium, and occasionally something that edges toward the past, not from Lily's side, which cannot go there continuously, but from Maya's, who has enough now to offer small pieces of the story to her mother without expecting her to receive them and integrate them. She offers them and Lily receives them, and sometimes something in them lands and sometimes it doesn't, and Maya has learned to be comfortable with both. She has been doing this for 14 months. She continues to open files. 87 more since file 401. None of them have been hers. All of them have been someone else's, which means all of them have mattered in the specific way that all 400 before them mattered, as the container holding a person who has been separated from their name, and a family that has been separated from the person, and a gap that the consortium's work is designed to close. Maya has a different relationship to this work now. Not a better one, not a worse one, a fuller one. Before file 401, she understood intellectually what the families on the other end of her calls had been carrying. She had been doing this work for 10 years. She had heard the silence before the words 400 times. She had thought she understood what was in the silence. She had understood most of it. She had not understood all of it. She understands all of it now. She said, in the interview with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, that she is frequently asked whether she feels lucky. Lucky that she became a DINA analyst. Lucky that file 401 came to her desk. Lucky that the referral from Coastal Gardens reached the consortium on a Tuesday in March, when Maya was the analyst on intake. She said she does not experience it as luck. She said it feels, from the inside, less like luck and more like the completion of something that was always in motion, a trajectory that she had been on since she was 6 years old without knowing it. Building the specific skills and knowledge and emotional endurance that would be required for the one morning when they were all needed at the same time for the same purpose. She said she thinks about the 400 people she found before her mother. Not because those findings were preparation for this one, exactly, but because every one of them was the same work. The same gap. The same family on the other end. The same silence before the words. She was doing the same thing for 400 families that she ultimately did for her own. She had not known that. It had not made it less real any of those 400 times. She has said, I know what it is to be the person with the information. I know what it is to be the person waiting on the other end. I have been both now. I think knowing both makes me better at the first one. Lily Chen is 53 years old. She is in a room with a window facing a garden. She knows her daughter's name. She knows the stuffed rabbit's name. On good days, she asks about the work and understands the answer, and sometimes adds something to it, a question, an observation, a specific quality of attention that Maya recognizes from the fragment she has been carrying that belongs to the person her mother was before the accident took the continuity away. On less good days, she is simply present, which is also its own thing, which is not nothing. Maya Chen is 28 years old. She has been carrying a photograph since she was 11 years old. The photograph is still in her wallet, next to a more recent one, a photograph taken in the garden at Coastal Gardens Memory Care on a Saturday in October. A woman in her mid-50s and a woman in her late 20s. The same cheekbones, the same asymmetry, the same wave in the hair, sitting next to each other in the specific ordinary quality of two people who are learning to be in the same place. Sandra Reeves called Maya 3 weeks after the identification, after she had been to Savannah and had her own first visit with Lily. She called at 9 in the evening on a Tuesday, which is a specific detail Maya remembers, because it was the same day of the week as the day she had opened file 401. She answered, and Sandra said, "I've been looking for her for 18 years. And Maya said, "I've been looking for her for 10. And they were both quiet for a moment, which was the specific quality of silence that belongs to two people who share a loss they have not previously been able to share with anyone who fully understood the shape of it. Sandra said, "How did you know? When you opened the file, how did you know?" Maya said, "The cheekbones, the asymmetry on the left side. I've been looking at those for 17 years. Sandra was quiet again. Then she said, "She has those too. I used to tease her about that asymmetry when we were kids. I said it made her look like she was always thinking harder on one side than the other." Maya said, "She probably was. They talked for an hour. They have talked many times since. They are in the specific process of building a relationship that has no template, a niece and an aunt who are also two strangers who spent decades separately looking for the same person and found her at the same time. There is grief in this, and there is relief, and there is the strange specific gratitude of discovering that you were not actually looking alone. You were just looking from different sides of the same gap." The Georgia Department of Human Services closed Maya's original 2005 case in April 2023. The case that had been opened under the name Jane Doe Child, Murray County, was formally resolved as Maya Chen. Current address: Atlanta, Georgia. Identified as the child of Lily Chen. Currently residing Coastal Gardens Memory Care, Savannah, Georgia. The file was marked closed. The case number was retired. There are still 607 unidentified persons in the state of Georgia. The number changes. It goes down when the consortium closes files, and it goes up when new admissions arrive without identification. It is not a problem with a permanent solution. It is a problem that requires continuous work, one file at a time, one careful comparison at a time, one call to a family at a time. Maya Chen will open her 489th file sometime in the next few weeks. She does not know that yet. She opens them in order. She opens them the same way she always has. She has learned from 400 files and one Tuesday morning in March that you cannot know which one will be the one that changes what you understand about why you are doing the work. You can only keep doing the work. File 401 is closed. The gap is closed. The name in the database is Lily Chen, not Ruth, not Jane Doe. The consortium's database now has 88 files opened since March 2023. Maya opened all of them the same way she opens every file, starting with intake, working through the medical history, arriving at the photograph. She has been opening files this way for 10 years. She will open them this way for the rest of her career. Some people spend their whole lives building towards something they cannot see. building the skills they do not know, yet they will need, arriving at the exact door at the exact moment when they are finally equipped to open it. Maya Chen spent 10 years identifying 400 other people's missing. On the 401st, she identified her own. She found her mother in a database she had been looking in for a decade. The photograph had been in her wallet the whole time. The answer had been in the database the whole time. She just had to become the person who could find it. She spent 10 years doing exactly that. She will spend the next 10 years doing it still. The work continues. The files open. And somewhere in the next 10 years, there will be another family on the other end of a call who needed someone like Maya Chen to be the one who answered. She will be there. She will know exactly what the silence before the words contains. She has been on both sides of it now. That is the whole of what she has to offer. It turns out to be everything that was needed.